Alexis Nasard, thank you for joining us today, and it's really a pleasure to welcome you. You've been an executive in residence since 2017 with IMD. Your background is in marketing with multiple roles at Procter & Gamble and Heineken. And if I'm correct, I think your first CEO role was with Bata, and then you moved to take over the CEO role at Kantar, and now Swarovski, which is one of the biggest players in the world in the jewelry space. And we're going to have this interview focused on a couple of themes. One is about your strategic vision and how you operationalize since you took over at Swarovski, and one is more focused on your leadership experience, lessons, etc., which we would like to hear about. So to begin with, perhaps it would be interesting to hear, what is Swarovski? What does it mean to the world?
That's a very good question. I say that because every time one needs to start a strategic design and planning process, it's important to ask ourselves, why do we exist? Why does the world need us? And most importantly, what is it that we do better than anybody else? Any strategy that is not built on a full cognizance of these premises will have lower chances to succeed. For the last 3 years, we've been significantly outgrowing the jewelry market since 2022 when we promulgated the LUXignite strategy. This year, on half year one, we have like-for-like sales of 7%. And we have a jewelry business which is growing more than 8%, which is 4 times the jewelry market. So we are not experiencing the slowdown that luxury companies are experiencing so far. So the business is continuing to be healthy, and over the last 3 years we made major leap forward in terms of margin recuperation. As you know, since the pandemic the company was not profitable.
Yes.
And now we have moved to the black territory whilst growing the business and whilst focusing on the brand, mostly in terms of luxury credentials and building desirability for the brand, which is a top strategic priority since I took over, since my administration took over.
So you're talking about luxury actually, and the question I had was that, can we talk of Swarovski as part of the luxury constellation? Is it a luxury brand, or what's your point of view?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
It all depends how you define luxury. And our definition for luxury is not the stereotypical definition of excessively high prices, fake rarity, and haughty service. For us, that's not luxury. For us, luxury is ultimately providing true value to the customer. Even if a customer is willing to pay 250,000 euros for a piece, ultimately, she's looking for value. Like a Ferrari owner is also looking for value. Offering true value, giving a feeling of joy and a sentiment of self-worth. That's what luxury should ultimately be about. And the way we position ourselves in the luxury sphere, we call ourselves a pop luxury brand. What is pop luxury?
Yes.
It is, on the one hand, the fundamental premises of any luxury business, which is having heritage, which is quality, which is creativity, and a unique savoir-faire. And we have all of those. But we add to that the following dimensions. One was being unapologetically modern. Swarovski is in the zeitgeist since 1895. At no point in time you're going to think about it as a brand that is passé or old-fashioned or requires de-dusting. It's always fresh. And we do that through different approaches. First through our designs, then through our store concepts, our collaborations. As you know, we've collaborated with Bella Hadid, then Kim Kardashian, and this year with Ariana Grande. And then, importantly, through our cultural footprint. Because we feel very strongly that a credible luxury brand should not only be a participant in the culture, in the world of culture, should be a protagonist. And for us, our participation and our protagonism in the cultural world affects social culture, the body positivity of Kim Kardashian, visual arts, music, stagecraft, fashion. We successively play in all these arenas today. And I don't know if you're aware or not, but we brought all that to life in our traveling exhibition, Masters of Light,
yes,
which actually closed just last week in Seoul,
yes,
with a lot of success, I have to say, and very, very long queues. So that's what I call one dimension of our luxury, which is to be permanently, unapologetically modern in the zeitgeist and being an active protagonist in the cultural world.
So you arrived at Versailles and took the helm in 1st of July 2022, and you arrive in the midst of a bumpy time for Swarovski. I think your predecessor lasted 18 months in the role. There have been articles in the press about the family also being having different views about the future of the company. So in your mind, what were the different problems that you saw when you took the helm?
We had a lot of challenges when I took over. First, you had the aftermath of the pandemic.
Yes.
And that was followed by a series of strategic shifts by the company. We have shift strategies very radically in a very short period of time, which in the end, like for any business, it fragilizes a company, it fragilizes a brand, and sometimes it creates confusion within the organization. To be clear, none of the strategies that were led was fundamentally wrong. The problem with them is that they were often imbalanced, a little bit extreme. And from one to the other, the shifts in themselves were damaging. So when we came with the LUXignite strategy in 2022, we proudly borrowed some of the themes that were in these previous strategies, which made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. One of which being an unapologetic foray into the luxury world and affirming and declaring Swarovski as a luxury brand, which is absolutely correct. The challenge with LUXignite is to do it on our own terms, because we're not interested in aping anybody in the way we define luxury or we execute luxury. Because remember back in 2022, now today most pundits are criticizing everything luxury is doing or saying. Back at that time, the very same ones were eulogizing anything big luxury companies did, and if you did anything different, you were in the wrong. We don't believe either one is right or wrong. But what a company to have strategic sustainability, you need to establish it on your own terms. This is why we came up with pop luxury as a positioning of the brand under the headline of the LUXignite strategy, which we launched in 2022, which included some themes which we have borrowed from some of the previous strategies, which made a lot of sense. For example, created diamonds. I was not the one who invented it. It was already in one of the previous strategies. What my administration has done is to scale it, organize it, and codify it, and expand it. We added some new concepts, which is the focus on top cities. This is where culture is created and trends are made. And you have to be present there if you want to be culturally influential as a brand. And the third thing is that we focused on what consultants call addressable challenges or addressable opportunities. I think it's insufficient to call them addressable. They have to be addressable and they have to be winnable. Because if they're addressable but winnable by somebody else and not you, that doesn't make sense in terms of where to play choices. So we focused on things that we are uniquely positioned to take advantage of and to win. Otherwise, the cost of growth will be too prohibitive for a company which was to start with quite a bit fragile financially.
Right. So to go back to your expansion turnaround, I don't know if you could turn around, but let's say clarifying certain ambiguities that you inherited. You mentioned, so for example, really anchoring the brand with legitimacy in the luxury space. What else did you do as part of this LUXignite strategy?
So first is designing the strategy according to the tenets that I described earlier. Second is that strategy was based on these following key transformational levers. Number one is the brand. The brand and the brand. This is our most important asset. It's a brand that is an icon. It's recognizable. It doesn't resemble anything in the market. It evokes colors, sparkle, emotions, joy, festivity. It's a brand that had very rich ingredients to start with. We have built on that and crafted a positioning which is joyful extravagance, which builds on all these things, but also codify what the brand stands for in order for us to be able to execute this with discipline and with rigor. So focus on the brand and focusing on driving not only the luxury perception, but also the desirability. And that is done through collections, retail, customer service, communication, and collaborations. And I'm pleased to say that now for the 5th quarter in a row, we're having record ratings on luxury perception and brand desirability. So far what we've been doing on the brand seems to be working. The second is the collection. I always say number 1, number 2, and number 3 reason for a customer to go online or to come to your store is your product. Is your product attractive? Is it desirable? Is it original? Is it nice? Is it worth it? So we spent a lot of time on the collection, sticking to the codes that were established initially by our creative director, but then having a much more elaborate architecture in terms of high, mid, low complication, price points, variations, colors, distribution, allocation. So we got a little bit more scientific in how we designed the collection, and we deployed it globally. The third is big cities. Really focus on big cities through the major brand moments we have. You know, we've had one in New York. Yes. We've had one in Milan. We're having one in Seoul. Also through opening of flagships. Yes. The flagship is a temple to the brand. This is where, I mean, the flagships have 3 roles. There is a commercial role, of course. There's a brand building role, but there's also a cultural role. We lend our codes to the city, and the city lends us back their codes. So it's a very important cultural play for us. Today we have flagships in New York, in Milan, in Tokyo, Shanghai, and in Seoul. This is also part of our participation, if you like, in these cities. Another tenet of the strategy is what we call luxury at scale. Again, we don't believe in fake rarity. And we are a big business, and we're not ashamed of that. We have a big distribution and a big customer base. And we're going to drive that because we believe scale helps our operation and also gives us the means to sustain and nourish the brand from a brand development standpoint.
Yes. So before we move into your leadership experience, perhaps one final question about what do you see next for Swarovski? After all, we are living geopolitically a bumpy world. More and more the realities of environmental constraints are coming to the surface. Maybe you also see challenges in the way employees, cultures, organizational cultures need to evolve, you know. So what's your take on those, and what do you see for your brand in the next 5 years?
We are living in perma-crisis. Ever since the pandemic, every year we think things are going to be normalizing, and they're not. You have 2 wars ongoing today. When you think one is getting under control, then it flares back. You have inflation that has gone up, has abated. Now it's back to normal levels pre-pandemic. But then there is concern now on oil prices and energy after the Middle East war. You have consumer sentiment. You have potential political instability in a market like the US, which would have been unthinkable 10 or 20 years ago. So we live in very turbulent times. What is really important is what I call diligence with measure. Diligence with measure. We have to be aware, we have to be diligent, but with measure. What do I mean by that? People are very quick to jump gun, to say, oh, now it's quiet luxury. Oh, now it's no longer quiet luxury. Oh, China is dead. Oh, China is the future. We stay clear of exaggerations and caricatures. We need not only strategic discipline, we need strategic fortitude. You know, when there was that whole press about quiet luxury and discussions whether should Swarovski play in that, no, we've never been that, and we will never be that. We are a maximalist brand, and we will always be a maximalist brand. Actually, we wouldn't even be credible at playing that game, and we wouldn't be good at it either. So that's what I call strategic fortitude. The things you stand by, you have to stick up to. Tactically, you have to stay agile. Obviously, we're living in a world, and we sell to consumers. We're not a B2B business with 18 months contracts, right? It's a very fickle industry, and it's a non-necessity. So being alert to what's happening in the market is important. So we need to maintain that agility without falling into what I call mosquito management, which is running to the next source of light. Otherwise, that creates more confusion than anything else.
And so do you think that, for example, this wide price range and stratification of your collections gives you more room to maneuver than a lot of luxury brands that are currently being trapped in how much, following how much they increase prices, pricing out so many customers in the last few years. Is that something you see is giving you more room to maneuver?
Yes, we do. We believe our wide price palette talks to a wide variety of customers. And regardless of what their wealth level is or what their willingness to spend on the categories, we believe it's one of the characteristics of the brand, and we intend to stick to that. We also, over the past 3 years, took a little bit of pricing, but we never exaggerated. We're always extremely cognizant of the fact that we always need to provide the customer with compelling value. No customer buys anything thinking they're making a stupid purchase. That does not exist. Everybody, rightly or wrongly, thinks they're doing an intelligent purchase, and we want to make sure we nurture that.
Very good. So let's look into your leadership lessons. And I don't know why, but what I have particularly in mind are professionals who become CEO for the first time. You know, and sometimes it's probably very, very inspiring, exhilarating, but it can be also daunting, right? When you shift from a functional or divisional leadership to enterprise level CEO responsibilities. Maybe could you distillate how you've approached that and what have you learned in this process?
I'll try to answer you as if I'm talking to an aspiring CEO.
All
Probably
right.
that would be the best way to do it.
Yes.
The one things
and our audience will
yes,
be,
yes. I mean, you know, I became CEO in 2016. I'm now almost 9 years as CEO. So, but I still remember these few months quite vividly. The few things that are going to be important when you move to a first CEO role is, first, you have to be cognizant that everybody's staring at you. Everybody's staring at you. Everybody's hanging to your lips, and everybody's interpreting everything you do, you don't do. Everything you say, you don't say. Everything that happens to you, everything that doesn't happen to you. Everything communicates. So you have to live as if you have a camera attached to your shoulder all the time. That's one thing. Second, when a new CEO takes a new business, you have to spend time thinking, what business are you actually in? It sounds trivial, but you'd be amazed how flawed definitions of businesses can lead to value destruction. What business are you in? Are you in the business of food delivery? Are you in the business of food quality? Are you in the business of leisure? It's not an obvious one. And for us, in every assignment, I stepped back and I said, in simple terms, if I were with an elevator with somebody, or if I were having dinner with my grandmother, she told me, what business are you in? I should be able to explain it. I think that's really important. Number three, there is one very important advice that I give to everybody. Never, ever badmouth a predecessor. First, it's bad manners. Second, nobody's replacing an idiot. That doesn't exist, okay? Probably some decisions you could do better. Good, but then you need to understand the context in which previous decisions were made, learn from them, and avoid reapplying them in the new environment if they're not reapplicable. And if they are reapplicable, take it with humility. There's nothing wrong in piggybacking on intelligent people's work. Never, ever badmouth a predecessor. And if it's really important to you to be seen as better, then show it. And if it's not important to you, it's even better. The other thing is communication. Communication for a CEO is at least a quarter of the job. Communicating with all stakeholders, customers, communities, shareholders, employees, partners. You are the representative of the company, and you have to keep all communication channels open because you are the face of the company. And another advice is, but that's a personal trait of leadership that I have. I'm not sure it's applicable to everybody. My leadership style is called tight, loose, tight. Being tight on principles, values, and strategy of the company. Being tight on results delivery. But being fairly loose in how people go about running their business, applying their preferences. There's no point in hiring talented people to micromanagement and tell them how to do things. So my philosophy has always been tight, loose, tight. In my experience, that helps you attract better people, and that helps you get the most out of people, because there is nothing more annoying for a capable, competent leader feeling that their boss is breathing down their neck. It's a poor practice. And last thing I would say is, as the ancient Romans said, repetita juvant. To repeat is virtuous. People are subjected to a lot of information every day from different quarters. It's really important to always repeat the important things. Repeat, repeat, repeat at the point of boredom, to make sure everybody understands what you stand for and what the direction forward is.
Right. And I suppose another angle of the new CEOs perhaps is how do you approach the work and the structuration and the trust building in your top team? Right. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
So the fact of the matter, when you're a CEO, the buck stops with you. So what does that mean? It means everything good happening, you take credit for, even if you're not even aware of some of them. And everything bad that happens is your fault. Anything. So that's a big burden for many people, and you have to be cognizant of that. The second thing is, there's nothing that speaks better than results. Nothing that speaks better than results. I'm sure you read The Shoe Dog of Phil Knight. And what he says is, you are what your numbers say you are. Yes. Sad or fortunate, it's a fact. In the end of the day, look how quickly the mood changes whenever the results of luxury companies change. Just not even 6 months, with a span of just 6 months. So the fact and the brutal reality of our world is that you are what your numbers say you are. And the best credibility is delivering numbers early. As early as possible, of course, without damaging long-term value. Yes. The second one is generosity is incredibly important. Generosity means when you're a CEO, you're a captain on the ship, and everybody matters. So credit has to be distributed widely. Credit is something lots of people live on, and it's mere nature of humanity. I wouldn't believe anybody who says that positive feedback does not give them positive energy. So right. Giving credit up, down, and sideways is important.
Perhaps also an extra layer of where you operate, if you like, is being a CEO in a family business when you're not part of that family. Yeah. What does it mean? What is that really something specific that you have to take into account? How do you approach family relationships as an outsider CEO? And what are your advice here?
The answer is yes and no, because family businesses come in all sorts of shapes and forms. You can have the Italian entrepreneur who is chairman and founder and executive chairman and the majority shareholder. You can have a second generation who's taking over from their parent, and you have 2, 3 siblings, and you can have an extended family with 150 with various degrees of agreements amongst them. So exactly. They come in very different shapes and forms. So that is unfortunately the one thing where you cannot have a cookie cutter approach. But what is most important...
Is there one situation more difficult than others, or...?
No. They all have their easiness and their difficulties, right. Unfortunately. Okay. But the one important thing to be clear on is, what is the real covenant that you have with the shareholders? What actually do they expect from you? And that has to be said and interpreted, because sometimes people have something in mind they're not able to articulate properly. So it's really important that you understand what is expected of you. And importantly, not only as you understand the makeup of the family, it's important that the family understand what kind of CEO you are. Because it's a two-way street. You know, there are some families who expect the CEO to essentially be an executor of what they want. Yes. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're comfortable with it, that's okay. If you're not that kind of CEO, and you're a CEO, then you have to be very clear about that at the beginning, and then conclude together whether this is the right candidacy or not. And the expectations of family business from CEOs can be an extraordinary range. So that is really important to understand what they need, what they expect from you, and what kind of CEO you are. Many people in a recruiting process are a little bit shy of declaring that, but that is really important. It's a win-win.
Right. And perhaps a final question, Alexis, is really so you're extremely well-read. You're passionate about a lot of cultural topics, political topics, history, aesthetics. How do you bring those humanistic characteristics, if you like, of a well-rounded man into your leadership role? You know, because it's not generally the case across the board. You know, so I always had that curiosity about you, about your culture and how you use that in your professional environment.
I'm privileged enough to work in a business that can call on that. And I'm privileged enough to have people around me who are sensitive to this dimension as well. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of fruitful exchanges that happen in that regard. Because in the end, what is a piece of creation? It's a piece of culture. Mm. What is a piece of communication? It's a piece of culture. What is serendipity in walking around the flagship store? It's not that different from a museum, if you think about it. So there are lots of venues to allow this to come to life. I think the challenge is that the CEO who has these characteristics needs to communicate them, suggest them, but not impose them. That is really where the art is. You know, when I communicate with the creative director, we have really good conversations because she's also very cultured and very attuned, but they're always on a suggestive level. And more often than not, because I have such people surrounding me, including my chief product creation officer, my chief brand officer, they actually take them on board and they really try to explore them. It's not that they are said and forgotten. So the nature of the business and the nature of the people surrounding me, I consider myself quite privileged in that regard. And let's see. I mean, the beauty with culture is that it's infinite and its inspirations are infinite. So there is a lot that you can play on going forward.
Right. And final word about you, Alexis Nasard, as in the evolution of your professional career. What are your aspirations? What really also gives you joy? You know, personally, and maybe it's in relationship to your business, but not necessarily. And what are your aspirations for what's coming next?
What gives me energy is feeling that we collectively are contributing to the world in terms of positive feelings. Our category is about beauty, is about joy, is about self-fulfillment. I find that very meaningful. The second thing that gives me a lot of energy is a little bit more martial. I like winning. Okay. I like winning. Mm. And when you work in luxury, winning is not beneath you. It matters. And an organization that is not winning ends up becoming a museum. Right. And I don't believe in fake dilemmas. Sometimes people tell you, oh, but this is a long-term business. There is no long-term without short-term. Mm. That's delusional. Companies that get used to flunking the short-term with the view of having a great long-term are deluding themselves. So that is why, for me, the discipline in developing and delivering short, medium, and long-term is really important and is essential for winning. And you need an organization that really, really wants to win, because the difference between okay and great oftentimes boils down to that mindset.
Alexis Nasard, it was very, very insightful to talk to you. Thank you very much for engaging our audience, for your continued support towards IMD, towards our students, our communities. And we look forward to welcoming you again. All the best for what comes next at Swarovski. And thank you for sharing and continuing to update us about what will come next.
With pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alexis.